In a small town nestled between rolling hills and thick woods, Jack hadn't thought about the treehouse in years. Now, at 32, he found himself standing on the same overgrown path that had led him there so many times as a child. The old wooden structure had been the site of countless childhood adventures, but it also held something deeper, something that he had tried to forget for years. Today, he had returned to confront it. Jack hadn't planned to come back. Life had pulled him away from this small town, and he had built a comfortable existence far from his childhood memories. But the passing of his father had brought him back, and with it came a flood of memories. His father had built that tree house when Jack was 10, a place where he could escape with his two best friends, Mark and Claire. They had spent entire summers there, sharing secrets, dreams, and, eventually, something far darker. As Jack approached the clearing, the treehouse came into view. It was still standing, though barely. The once strong wooden beams had rotted, the walls sagged, and the paint had long since peeled away. It looked haunted now, an eerie echo of the past. Jack stood still, feeling the weight of everything that had happened there. 20 years ago, it had been the three of them, Jack, Mark, and Claire, inseparable. They had turned that treehouse into their secret world, a place where they were safe from the troubles of the outside. But as they grew older, their childhood adventures began to shift. Jack remembered the day when it all changed, when Mark and Claire had started to grow distant from him. There was a secret, one he hadn't been part of, and it had changed everything. He could still picture that summer afternoon. Claire had been quiet, sitting in the corner of the treehouse, her back against the wall, while Mark had paced nervously. Jack had asked them what was wrong, but they never told him. They had shared something in that treehouse, something they had promised to keep hidden forever. Jack had felt the shift, the way the air between them grew tense, the way their laughter had stopped. 2 weeks later, Claire was gone. She had left town suddenly, her family saying it was for personal reasons, but Jack never bought the story. He had tried to reach out to Mark, but Mark had pushed him away. The treehouse, once a symbol of their bond, had turned into a place Jack avoided. He hadn't been back since that summer, until now. Jack climbed the rickety ladder, the wood creaking beneath his weight. Inside, the treehouse felt smaller than he remembered. The light filtered through the cracks in the wood, casting strange shadows on the floor. It was then that he saw it, the small box tucked into the corner, dusty and forgotten. He crouched down and pulled it out, his heart racing. The box had belonged to Claire. He remembered her bringing it one day, saying it held their biggest secrets. They had laughed about it then, pretending it was full of treasures. But now, holding it in his hands, Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He opened the lid slowly. Inside were old photographs, faded with time. Jack flipped through them, recognizing the faces. His, Mark's, Claire's, all smiling, innocent before everything had changed. Then he found the note. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting shaky. It was Claire's. Jack unfolded it carefully, the words almost too faded to read. Mark and I can't keep this secret anymore. If you find this, Jack, I'm sorry. I never wanted you to be part of this, but I have to tell someone. Something happened that summer. We didn't mean for it to go this far, but now it's too late. I'm leaving because of it. I'm scared of what will happen if anyone finds out. Jack's hands shook as he read the letter. He had always known something had happened between them, something they never told him. But this was something darker than he had imagined. He stood up, the letter clutched in his hand, and looked around the decaying treehouse. What had they done? Why had Claire left? And why had Mark never spoken about it again? Jack left the treehouse in a daze, his mind spinning with questions. He walked back through the woods, his feet moving on autopilot, until he reached the old road that led into town. He had to find Mark. He needed answers. Mark had stayed in town after all these years. He lived a quiet life, working at his family's hardware store. Jack hadn't spoken to him in over a decade, but now he had no choice. He drove straight to Mark's house, the letter burning in his pocket. When Mark opened the door, he looked shocked to see Jack standing there. "Jack, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," Jack said, his voice firmer than he felt. "About Claire. About what happened that summer." Mark's face went pale. He stepped aside, letting Jack in without a word. They sat down in the living room, the silence between them thick with old memories and unspoken truths. "I found the letter," Jack said, pulling it from his pocket and handing it to Mark. Mark stared at it, his hands trembling as he took it. He read the letter slowly, and when he finished, he looked up at Jack with haunted eyes. "I didn't want you to find this." "What happened, Mark?" Jack asked. "What did you and Claire do?" Mark leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "We were kids, Jack. We didn't know what we were doing. It was an accident." "An accident? What are you talking about?" Mark's voice cracked as he spoke. "We found something in the woods that summer. Something we shouldn't have. It was dangerous. Claire and we thought we could control it, but we couldn't. Things got out of hand, and someone got hurt." "Who?" Mark closed his eyes. "A man. He was hiking through the woods. He saw us, saw what we were doing. He tried to stop us, and things went wrong." Jack felt the air leave his lungs. "You killed someone? It wasn't supposed to happen." Mark shouted. "We panicked. Claire wanted to tell someone, but I told her we couldn't. We buried him, Jack. Right there, near the treehouse." Jack stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. "And Claire left because of it? She couldn't live with the guilt," Mark said, his voice barely a whisper. "I've been living with it ever since." Jack felt sick. The treehouse, their sanctuary, had been hiding a terrible secret all these years. Now, everything made sense. Claire's sudden departure, Mark's silence, the weight that had hung over him for years. "I have to go," Jack said, walking toward the door. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "Jack, wait," Mark called after him. "Please." But Jack didn't stop. He left the house, the weight of the past pressing down on him. The truth had finally come out, but it left him with more questions than answers. What would he do now? What would happen to Mark? And most of all, what had really happened that summer in the woods?